Hey guys, so in this video I'm going to be going over some common complaints that I've heard about the CEOR method. So I asked some people a couple weeks ago, I think, to give me some complaints that they've heard about the method or some complaints that they have themselves. So I'm going to be going over those now. I'm not going to give a perfect justification for every single complaint. Some complaints are more valid than others, in my own opinion. And most of these do have validity to some point, but I think what I'm going to be trying to do is justify some of these, give my own thoughts on why I think that X, Y, and Z is actually okay to some extent, and probably give some ways that each point can be improved. I don't have anything planned. This is mostly going to be a ramble. But yeah, I'm just going to go over these. So the most common complaint that I've seen is the inspection step being too difficult. So what that is referring to is when you're planning the CP line. So it's going to be this plus corner permutation, or just planning anything after it. This mostly has to do with corner permutation tracing being very difficult to get used to. Now, my only point to this is that it just gets easier with time. Most of the top solvers can inspect corner permutation in around 3 seconds, which obviously that's still a good chunk of your inspection, but given the benefit that you get, which is a guaranteed 2-gen finish, I'd say it's fairly worth it. But planning anything after corner permutation plus the first block, I have to agree that's very difficult, just given how much time you're taking with corner permutation plus tracking how your corner permutation solution is going to affect the rest of the first block. Then at that point, you're almost at the end of your inspection, so it's difficult to plan onwards. So that point I agree with, but for planning corner permutation plus first block, which is called the CPFP, personally, I think it just takes time. Main thing is getting used to the corner permutation tracing and just learning more triggers and more ways of solving corner permutation is going to help a lot. All right, now the next point is for the Midsolve geo recognition. So that's going to be when after doing your partial edge orientation, you have to recognize the orientation of 8 edges, which is a lot. And I fully agree that this is very difficult to do in the middle of your solve. So that's why I have always said what I believe people should do is after solving your extension, while you're solving your extension, look ahead to your front right and back right edges. So in this case, that's going to be the red, green, and the red, blue. Now you'll notice these don't have white or yellow on them. So when tracking this, you want to track where they go and what their orientation is going to be. That way you can recognize EO 3-sided, because at that point you'll just be looking for the yellow and white edges. So here's an example. So we have this and this. this will make a 4-move extension, and then tracking these two, we see they go here, and then this one we can use for our partial EO. This is going to stay misoriented, this will stay oriented. And then looking at these sides, after you've done that, it's actually fairly easy to recognize your edge orientation, because since we know this one's bad, right, then we're just looking for white and yellow. So these three right here are bad. Now obviously this isn't a perfect solution, it's still fairly difficult to do, but that's one way to improve on it. Something else that people have done is do stripe to edge orientation. That doesn't solve the problem fully, but and you will have to look at 7 edges instead of 8, but that's something to consider that might help with predicting. Now the next point is that there's little block building. This is mostly due to the restriction of F moves. Now I understand this point to an extent. I would say that block building using wide R and wide U moves is still very possible. So I'll do an example here. So I'll just solve my extension, and then doing block building, it's fairly similar to Ru. So for example, if I were to solve this, I could pair these up and then place this back here and this. But obviously there are some downsides to this, so let me try and get an example. So for this example, actually this isn't a very good example. Okay, so for this example, something here you could do is use an F move to pair this up and then insert. That would be an example of block building not being as accessible with only RU, wide R, wide U moves, but you can do an alternate solution like this, for example. So that's something to think about. Now the next point is F moves are already pretty good for one-handed, so algorithms that use F moves can already be executed very well. Now obviously I'm not very good at executing F moves, but people that are don't really see the point in CEOR, since they can already execute F and D moves fairly well. And that's, you know, understandable. I think the main point of CEOR is just to keep a constant flow with only using R and U moves and wide R, because you're kind of staying in one grip. F moves, you kind of have to change your grip a little bit. But yeah, I'd say if you're already very good with F moves, then maybe a different method would be better for you. The next point, let's see. Okay, now this point has to do with the beginning of the solve when you're doing CP line and extension, which is sometimes you'll have a combination of wide R, wide U, and wide F. Now wide F moves in combination with wide U and wide R, I understand, because you kind of lose your grip. This is when it comes down to finding an alternate solution for solving either your CP line or your extension. But yeah, especially with wide R and wide U, it can be very difficult to get used to it, which is it's another thing that I know I've said this a lot already, but it just comes down to practice and time and just getting used to certain move sets. Yeah, not much to say here, but it is an understandable point. The next point is corner permutation recognition and EO stripe needs to be more systematic. So currently for corner permutation tracing, there's a couple ways to do it. The one way is to find pairs like this with two colors in common that are adjacent. It's like this, this, and this, and you'd compare these corners to find your swap. So in this case, these would be the swap, I believe. Yes. But that involves a lot of mental twists and sometimes can involve mental swaps. And then another tracing called Y-Ruru tracing involves finding your DFR and DBR corners, and then depending on where they are, you trace in a certain order. This is the tracing I use. This is probably the most systematic way, but it is fairly difficult and sometimes mentally taxing. So I agree with this. There have been some developments like with sticker recognition, with strong recognition, but nothing too great yet. So I agree with this. And then for edge orientation, recognizing A edges, that's something that I believe, like looking ahead to your two edges can really help with systematic recognition. But once again, it's still not perfect. All right, next point is not enough development. This kind of ties in everything that I've talked about, is that nothing is totally like, I'm not sure how to put it, but nothing that I've talked about is really top tier yet. There's still so much room to improve on everything that I've talked about. But I think with how much that needs to be done, this is definitely true, and I 100% agree with this. All right, and then the last point is it's hard to plan CPFB. Now, once again, just like the corner permutation line, this is something that you'll just have to get used to. So the way that I go about it normally is after finding my tracing, I will choose a solution, see if I can influence something, and then try and go from there, and then try and predict my next steps. So like here, for example, I can do UR2 UR prime, which will solve this in corner permutation. Here I see if I do UR2, this gets paired. And then there's a couple things I can do. I can either do a Y to UR prime, but that makes this kind of awkward. Or I can do U prime U2 R prime, which, predicting this, I see it's an easy four mover. So if I were to predict this, then I could just go straight into the four mover. Now eventually, the next thing you'd want to do, which I haven't done yet, is learn how F moves influence corner permutation. That's something, like I said, I haven't learned yet, but that is the ultimate goal, to get more efficient first blocks. But yeah, so that was all the points. Once again, a lot of this is a lot of this basically comes down to the point that more development is needed. There are definitely some bad steps. For example, edge orientation recognition, that is probably, as I've said for a while, the worst step of solving, just because of how difficult the recognition is and the awkwardness of a lot of double moves. But yeah, hopefully more development will be done. But yeah, if you have any thoughts in the comments, please let me know. This hasn't been a very good justification, in my opinion, for the CEOR method, but once again, this is still very new and not developed enough. But yeah, thanks for watching.